Welcome to the France 24 debate. France is caught right now in a row over the right to film police officers in the course of their duty. It's a controversy that's brought demonstrators onto the streets. Let's show you the scenes in Paris this weekend. A new law on the security of France goes to a final vote on Tuesday. The bill with the controversial amendment has been passed for the first time by the National Assembly. That happened on Friday night by a margin of 146 to 24. So, Article 24 concerns the right to film the police. It raises fears and concerns among many media here in France about the right to report and to inform. Well, this evening with our panel, we'll be discussing the issues. Police officers, I think we all acknowledge, have a tough job. But freedom to report and freedom of the press is an essential foundation of democracy. Our guests are here in Paris, Natalia Pouzireff, who's an MP with La République En Marche and member of the National Defence Commission. Natalia, thank you for joining us. Also in Paris, Danielle Obono from La France Insoumise, an MP, of course, a député. Danielle, thank you for being with us. We'll come to you both in a moment. First, this report here at France 24 by Andrew Hillier.
Opponents have called it a threat to France's standing as a beacon of human rights. But what's actually in the government's proposed global security law that's led to mass rallies up and down the country? The most controversial aspect of the bill would ban the publication of images which reveal the identity of police officers. Article 24 makes it illegal to publish images with intent to harm the officer's physical or mental integrity. An offence that would carry a penalty of 1 year in jail and a €45,000 fine. The text has whipped up widespread opposition from politicians to academics.
Cette loi prétend protéger les policiers. Je pense qu'ils n'ont rien demandé. Elle engage une escalade prévisible. On ne devient pas policier pour ça.
La difficulté, c'est que sur le coup, la tendance va être d'une part à l'autocensure et puis de la part des forces de l'ordre à éviter qu'elles soient filmées si elles estiment que cela peut mettre en cause leur action.
Critics say the law would make it harder for journalists to do their job and would make the public think twice before holding police officers to account for excessive use of force. But police unions say the measures are necessary to protect officers and their families from harassment online and when they're on duty. Article 22 on the use of drones is another controversial part of the bill. It would allow law enforcement to use them whenever there are fears of serious disturbances to public order, a measure that the UN says could deter people from taking part in peaceful protests. The bill would also give officers the right to publish their own footage to give their version of events, a move that critics say would infringe on people's right to privacy.
Thanks to Andrew Hillier for that summary of some of the issues in store. Let's bring in our guests, Danielle Obono of La France Insoumise and Natalia Pouzireff of La République En Marche. Thank you both for joining us, and I'll give you as much time and space to express what you feel throughout this first half of the programme. Danielle, I'll start with you, if that's okay. Your thoughts on what is going on here. Do you see this as a kind of infringement of what France stands for, or do you think the police need to be protected?
I think the police needs to be protected, but the way the government is going with this is really problematic for the people and for the police. We are living we've been living for the past 3 years an increase in authoritarian measure from the government, and just to recall, the biggest mass movement in France happening 2 years ago with the Yellow Vest movement had already seen excessive use of force by the police because of the political orders that were given to the police. So we have a government who only use force to quash opposition. And at that time, there was already photojournalists and journalists covering those mobilizations that were targeted by the police. So what is going on is, with this law, as you pointed, it's very important to point that it's not just Article 24 that is problematic. There are several articles in this law, in this bill, that are really problematic, and that will mean a drastic regression on human rights and citizen rights in France, not just by the press, but by the citizens. And it's a fundamental democratic right to be able to hold police officer, but also the minister who gives order accountable from what they are doing. And I think that's why so many people are so upset, because we've already experienced firsthand the brutal repression of the Macron government over the past years, and we fear that, and many fear that it will only get worse.
Indeed, Danielle, and to back up what you're saying, of course, the United Nations has spoken out about the policing of the yellow vest protests and the overuse of force by French police officers during those weeks of unrest on the French streets. Let's bring in Nathalie Pouzireff from La République En Marche to give a reply to that. Nathalie, can I just sort of put it to you that perhaps this doesn't best represent France as the country of human rights, this kind of law which might prevent journalists or even citizen journalists from actually doing what comes naturally, filming stuff?
This prison bill is in no way intended to restrict the freedom to report. Some clarification have been presented by the Minister of Interior last Friday. But I would like to start by recalling, first of all, that this bill does not cannot be reduced to only this sensitive Article 24. There are some other issues, and the first aim being how to reorganize the security forces so that we can guarantee the security of large events. You know that France will be hosting the Olympic Games in 2024, and we need huge, massive resources and capacities to make sure that the security of the people will be ensured. And for that, you have to have a strong organization. And this is the first intention of this law. Now, coming back to Article 24, it's about not restricting the right to take pictures or movies. It's about, displaying some images which could harm our policemen or policewomen. It is to be noticed that we have seen on the social network pictures of a policeman or policewoman together with his name and its address. And you can imagine that it's a big threat to them and to their family. And so this is exactly what we have to avoid. We cannot let this kind of harassment going on the net. These people, they protect us all year long. They have been paying the price with their life. They have been very active to fight against terrorism. As you know, France was badly hit by terrorist acts, and we just want to make sure that they themselves and their families cannot be personally targeted on the social networks.
Indeed. I'm thinking of the case in Magnanville when two police officers were the victim of a terror attack. It was horrific. I mean, clearly, somehow their address was discovered. I'm not quite sure exactly the circumstances of why, but it certainly rings true with what you're saying, Nathalie Pouzireff, in terms of why the government feels this needs to be introduced. Danielle, you said that you believe the police should be protected. Do you think the journalists should be protected too? The journalists should have their right to work, their right to film whatever they want, the right to film and show police misconduct, if indeed that is happening?
I think it's fundamental in a democracy. If we believe ourselves to live in a democratic, with a democratic society with the rule of law, there needs to be protections. And let me just add about the police officer that are on duty. And I feel everybody will agree here in France, in the National Assembly, that they need to be protected, and they are. There are already laws that condemn people who harass online police officer, and it's even an added reason to sanction them. So it's not like they are not protected. They are. There's already, we have one of the toughest legislation in that matter. So first of all, there's already a legislation that protects the police. And I think what is problematic with the way the government is using it, the government is actually using police officer against the people. You had a high-ranking police officer here in Paris who actually said to a demonstrator during the Yellow Vest movement, we are not on the same side. And so you have a government which is politicizing police in order to suppress protest. And also, I want to just to add that I agree with my colleague about the fact that this bill as a whole is problematic, because what is being said is they want to build a security continuum, which means to us is just a continuity of repressive law, where they want to develop private security. They want to blur the difference between public service and private service. And as I said, there's the matter of drone, which was already sanctioned actually by our High Court, that said that the government used drones during demonstration. That was unlawful. So they put up this bill in order to develop this mass surveillance state. This is basically what they've been saying, and they will add more measures in the next bill that they're working on, which is called about against separatism. So I think there's a coherence with the previous measures that have been done by the governments, and what we know is that it's always targeting citizen. It has already targeted journalists, and it's also a way to prevent the movement against police brutality. Because, and that's my last point on that subject, because over the past years, it's thanks to people actually filming police officers on duty that use excessive force against citizens that the debate about police brutality has been put forward in France. That's the only reason why, because we had those videos that were put into the internet, that the government started and was forced to acknowledge what was happening. And I think it shows how useful it is, and that when they are malign intent, that when they are negative intent, it's already punished by the law. You talk about Magnanville, we can talk about a lot of cases where people who use it, and we showed private information about police officers, have been condemned by the justice system. So it's not like the justice system is broken for that. There are harsh punishment for unlawful behavior that already target police officers. But what is missing is holding police officers accountable for their bad action. The few ones who are acting in a very problematic manner are never held accountable for their action. And I think the government is trying to prevent those actions to be put forward and to be ask justice for that by the people who are victims of those violence.
Danielle, thank you very much. Let's give Natalie Pouzieff a chance to answer some of those issues that you've raised. Natalie, can I raise another one just before you address what Danielle was saying about public and private kind of officers working together, the use of drones, for instance, which is extremely interesting in terms of what that could imply. The question I want to put to you before you go to that, Natalie, is can you guarantee that myself, my colleagues, will be able to do their job properly, be able to go out, film what we need to film, use our initiative and our judgment as journalists, for which we have a press card and we are accredited with that, go out and do our jobs? Can you guarantee that will still be the case?
Absolutely. There's no way we would come back on that. Any journalist will be able to film whatever he wants, whenever he wants. And there's no question, no matter on that. A kind of a judgment that can be made at posteriori, if we consider that these images of police forces in their action could harm any of the policemen or policewomen, there should be sanctions. That's what it means. But it's not like trying to prevent you from filming at any time. And I must say there's a kind of a ideological bias to all of that, because we need to for securing these big events such as Olympic Games and so on, we have to call private security services, for instance. And the exact goal of this proposal, this bill, is to provide a legal framework. That's what we need. We need a legal framework if we want to be able to use to make use of this private security.
Will these
services.
private people? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
drones-
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Natalie Pusdieff. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Will these private individuals, as you're talking about, have the same powers as police officers?
More and more.
Or more?
No. They are different. They are different levels. These
But they are given
addresses
some
three
more
different
power.
levels: the private security services, the local police forces, what we call the police municipale, and the national police force. So, and we have prerogatives different, varying for each kind of these three levels. And for instance, there's one article of this bill that is aiming at creating a local police force for the Paris city, because Paris city is not having such a local police force.
A local Paris police force.
So
Natalie, let me pause you and give Danielle one final word for this half, because I know you're staying with us. Danielle, final word from you.
The problem is that the bill is giving more power to private security, and it's, as I said, it's blurring the lines between private and public sector security officer, first of all. And second of all, it has already happened. Press, journalists have been barred to cover demonstration. Just a couple of days ago, there was a demonstration in front of the nearby the National Assembly, and actual press and journalists with their press name tag were barred for covering. Some of them were sent to prison, were arrested, and there's been a lot of outcry for journalists. So it is already happened. The bill hasn't even been voted yet. It's already been happened. It is happening right now. So I could talk also. I could show the example of what has been happening when a journalist would write a paper that Emmanuel Macron disapprove of. He would give a call and or be fired. We already had those instances where the executive power is actually preventing freedom of speech happening in France right now. And I'm afraid it's just going to get worse if this bill is being voted. And hopefully more and more MPs from the Macron's majority in the National Assembly will decide to vote against it. Some spoke publicly about the fact that they will not vote for it, and hopefully the mobilization against this law will make them realize.
Danielle, I need to cut you off because we're out of time. Thank you very much indeed. Natalie, I'll give you a chance to reply in part two. Thank you both very much indeed. Stay with us. More to come in this France 24 debate. Thank you for being with us. This is part two of the France 24 debate. France caught in a row over the right to film police officers in the course of their duty, a controversy that's brought demonstrators onto the streets. There have been demonstrations across France over the weekend. A new law on the security of the country goes to a final vote on Tuesday. It's already been passed for a first time by the National Assembly by a very comfortable margin. In this bill, Article 24 concerns the right to film the police. It raises fears and concerns among many media here in France about the right to report and to inform. We've had a very lively first half debate with Danielle Obono of La France Insoumise and from the government, Natalia Pusdieff, who's a member of the National Defence Commission. Natalia is still with us. Thank you, Natalia, for that. Joining us for the second half of our debate is from Paris, Cécile Coudriou, who's president of Amnesty International France. Cécile, we'll be with you in a second. I'm just going to give Natalia a chance to reply to some of the issues that Danielle was raising there at the end of the first part. And one of them that particularly sort of rang a bell with me was the idea of the government trying to control what journalists do, what journalists say. Now, can I just say here and now that if I felt there was any sense of that where I work here at France 24, I would actually stand up, walk out and resign in protest. That's just me speaking. I can't speak for my colleagues. But certainly we have no sense or pressure that we have to report in any particular way here. We just basically go right along the line and tell the facts as we see them. Natalia, the idea that maybe Mr. Macron's government is interfering in the media, what do you say to that?
Now, you know, we utmost value the freedom of speech, the freedom of press in France, and that is not going to change. So that was what I said previously. I think there's a kind of ideological bias to all that, and it's really more about how we organize, how we structure different levels of security forces in France, and how we can give a kind of legal framework when it's needed, for instance, for the usage of drones or for calling to private security services. And it's this legal framework we are trying to put together. And the sensitive Article 24 is indeed a bit different to the rest of the prison bill because it deals with the protection of those who are protecting us. And it's only about increasing sanctions in case of their names and addresses together with their pictures are posted on the social network. This is all it is about. It's not about restraining the right to report, to inform, and it's not about restricting the right to film anything that is happening, and it's not about protecting, preventing any police or any justice investigation.
You're not going to protect police misconduct. If things happen and it's exposed by a journalist, that will be prosecuted and due course will be allowed to happen in terms of the justice system. Natalia, I'm hearing that loud and clear. Nonetheless, there's this threat of a year in prison and a 45,000 euro fine, which is far more than most journalists earn, I believe, here in France. That is still a threat which this bill will put on journalists, and I'm sure some of them will have that in their mind as they do their job. Can I bring in Cécile to comment on the situation? Cécile Coudriou, President of Amnesty International France. Do you fear, Cécile, that this bill will lead to misconduct, perhaps not being acted upon, reported, not coming to light?
Absolutely. This is one of our concerns. We are very much concerned that the kind of fight against impunity would be hampered by such a law. But first of all, I would like to make sure it is clear that we have no ideological bias at Amnesty International. Our constant reference will be international law. That's why I would like to mention first that France has made international commitments to respect human rights. For example, Article 19, which specifies that journalists, but also citizens in general, should be able to not only film, but also disseminate information because it is in the public interest. So the problem with that law is that today it is very vague when we talk about a bad intention. It is really an open door to an arbitrary interpretation. That's why even journalists could be accused of that. So we think it's really a wrong message to send not only to citizens, but also to the police in a way. That's ironic because I heard my interlocutor mentioning the slogan, they use a lot at the moment, which is we're trying to protect those who protect us. But our slogan is that we should protect human rights because human rights protect us all. So it's not an ideology, it is a reality which is today, we think, really threatened by this Article 24, but it's not the only issue we have with that bill. I will have the time to talk about it, I guess.
You will have the time to talk about it, Cecile. Can I just put to you something that maybe you think I'm reaching a bit too far here, but is this kind of Article 24, these kind of things that we're outlining, the restrictions possibly on who can film what and who can show what and who can broadcast whatever it is this the sort of thing that you, in your organisation, have reported upon? And when we've read what you've actually reported upon, we've put it as a main story, as a big headline. How do you feel that we're discussing France in the same context?
Actually, we're pretty much attached to the notion of exemplarity, and it is all the more ironic as France has a very strong image of human rights, the country of human rights, actually. So that's why we are trying to convince members of parliament at the moment that they should play a role in maintaining that position of France on the international scene. So to come back to the Article 24, why do we have an issue with that? We don't think that the recent amendment is a guarantee that can be satisfactory, because again, with this vague argument of protection, it doesn't guarantee that any other citizen, and I repeat, it is a right, any person observing an illegal use of force should be able not only to film it, but also to disseminate this information. And we, as an NGO, we have used repeatedly for our own research such videos, of course, after checking and double checking and making sure they are authentic. And when there is an illegal use of force by a policeman or a policewoman, it's important to be able to document it in a very neutral way. And that's why we think that this new article, in spite of the amendments, is still a great threat on freedom of expression and freedom to be informed as well.
Cécile Coudriou, President of Amnesty International of France, please stay with us. Thank you very much for sharing those thoughts with us. Debating with you is Natalia Pouziev, who is from the National Defence Commission here in France, an MP for La République En Marche. Natalia here representing the government, of course, proposed this new global security law and that controversial Article 24, which is raising many questions among people in the media here about whether journalists will have the right to do their job. And Natalia so far has told us that we will, as journalists, have the right to do that. Natalia, once I did a debate regarding China back in 2008 when they were going to stage the Olympics and raised the question about human rights. Chinese ambassador, this might embarrass him if he's still here, rang my boss and said that I should be sacked and demanded that I be sacked. Now, I'm not anticipating that the same reaction will happen from the Elysee tonight, calling for my editorial head to roll. And I know that France isn't like that. However, there are going to be many journalists who are going to question whether they can go about what they should be doing in terms of revealing things. And can I just raise another issue regarding, say, citizens in the street having the right to film? And this obviously looks towards the United States. George Floyd, for instance, that incident, if that hadn't been filmed by a person in the street, those police officers would not have been held to account. One is pretty sure of that. Because look at the case of Breonna Taylor. That one wasn't filmed. And of course, there's nothing like the same kind of attraction to get justice for her. Isn't it essential, I put to you, Natalia Pouziev, that people need to have the right to act freely, to film what they want? And maybe your argument's not with them, but it's with the social networks, the social media people, about stopping the dissemination of, for instance, personal details of police officers.
Yes, indeed. First, I think it's important to stress that it's not the journalists who are targeted. It's no way by, preventing them from doing their job. And in that respect, I think the press will be always free to conduct any investigation it wants to conduct and reveal any kind of misbehavior that may have happened or not. It's not targeting the press, really. It's targeting the people who would manage to identify by their names and their addresses the policemen or the policewomen in the course of their action. This is what it is about. So there should be this distinction really should be made. It's not against the power of investigation of the press. It's about what kind of information you deliver on the social network. And I can't see a professional journalist that would, based on the capture of a scene that he has made, put the name of or the identification code of the police guy, and its address, and go and tell other guys on the social network, go and harm this man because he misbehaved during this interpellation. So I can't journalists conducting this way. And if there's an investigation to be conducted by the justice, any citizen, any journalist can refer to the justice, and the justice will take its course.
Indeed, no card-carrying journalist that I know would revert to the kind of behaviour you've just outlined. I think it would be regarded as reprehensible, and quite rightly so. Can I bring you back in, Cécile, from Amnesty International, to pick up from that one, really? Because in demonstrations, you see police officers with cameras filming the demonstrators, pointing the cameras at the demonstrators. And then the demonstrators, of course, they turn back and do the same thing. Clearly, there are lines here that are going to be crossed in terms of how this law can be enforced.
There is something very ironic, too, about the question of who is watching who, because today policemen can decide, it is their decision, to activate or deactivate the body camera they have on, and they can send live these images without the consent of the person who is being filmed. And at the same time, the same people, the same policemen, and the government too, claims that it is not possible to imagine a world where policemen would be constantly filmed, even though at the same time it is said that they have nothing they did nothing wrong. I mean, so there is something ironic, because the argument usually used against citizens who do not want to be filmed because they want their right to privacy respected, which is again confirmed in the international law, Article 12 this time, right to privacy is absolutely guaranteed. And France has signed that covenant protecting that right. And yet, this right to privacy would be definitely threatened, not only by these body cameras, but also with the drones, because there is no legal frame today. It is an open door to a surveillance that would become undiscriminated, which is absolutely illegal from the perspective of international law again. So we believe that, on the one hand, the police today refuses to be accountable because images are seen as a threat, and it is not at all systematic. And when it is a threat, indeed, it can happen. As it was said before, it can be punished by law already. So we don't see the point of that article unless it is a sign that there is a kind of drift away from a respect of human rights that would be really a terrible news about France and its position on the international stage. So we believe that both drones and body cameras today offer no guarantee for citizens to see their right to privacy protected. So it is a problem also of the accelerated procedure in Parliament. There is not enough time for debate, whereas these three articles, Article 21, 22, and 24, were proposed later on, and we don't have enough time to make all the members of Parliament aware of how much the implication is huge on human rights. So it is something which is unprecedented, and we are really calling up on the government and members of Parliament to remove these articles because of that.
Indeed. Cécile, bear with us. Let's bring Natalia Puzarev in to address some of those things. I mean, clearly the Interior Minister, Gérald Darmanin, has a number of dossiers on his desk which are urgent and need a lot of attention. Things in terms of the threat regarding Islamist terrorism, for instance, the state of emergency, the continuum of that state of emergency is something which is of great pressing importance to all French people, and I think beyond French borders too. But to address Cécile's point there, Natalia, why is the government in such a rush? Are you not giving it due course? Is there not enough debate in what you're trying to do with these new laws?
Well, the procedure is time-consuming for sure. We have a very full agenda in the next months to come, and it has been a bit slowed down by the COVID crisis. But however, the democracy is still playing its full. The debate is concluded in the National Assembly, then it goes to the Senate, and the upper chamber will certainly take its time to review it. There will be more and more debate, and it will come back to the National Assembly, and we'll debate more and more about that. And I'm sure the Senate, the French Senate, will bring some modifications, some additions to this bill. Then the Conseil constitutionnel and Constitutional Council may review the bill as well. So there will be more and more information being, feeding the debate. So I don't think we can say that the democratic principle have been jeopardized so far, and I'm sure we'll have more and more to comment on that. And I would like to take this opportunity just to correct one thing, is that the bill was proposed by member of the parliament. It's not a bill presented by the government, but it is, and it's having an echo regarding the work that has been conducted by the government on a livre blanc, white book on the interior security. And so that's why we wanted to move ahead on this on these new ways to organize our security forces. And again, it's about 3 different levels of security forces: private security services, local police, and national police force. So this is mainly what it is about.
Let's bring Cécile back in to talk about that. Cécile, do you feel convinced by what you're hearing?
Absolutely not, because I think the main point remains the implications on human rights. I'm not talking about the whole bill, but these 3 articles definitely should have been open to a much better debate than this. We deserve better. France deserves better. So I think it is really unacceptable that we can open the door to a surveillance of every citizen, which is without a legal frame that could be, only with time discussed. We have, for example, the CNIL, which is a commission, about everything around privacy on the internet. And this is something we need time to do. And also the question of, as I said before, impunity for the police. We need to rebuild trust between the population and the police. And this bill, and particularly these articles, send the wrong message. It means that we do not trust citizens anymore. And on the contrary, we do not believe that the police should be under public scrutiny. And it means that, in a way, we are encouraging at the highest level of the government, not only people who propose the bill, but also the government, and President Macron himself encouraged that principle, that the police should not be under public scrutiny, and that there is nothing, as he said, such as police brutality. It exists in France today. Too many instances have been seen. Even journalists have been victims of police violence today. It happens, unfortunately. So we need a law that is much better than that would be in conformity with international law. And it is not the case, I'm afraid, today. So for the last time, I'm trying to use this opportunity. Thank you for calling on the government and also on the members of parliament to remove these 3 articles.
Indeed. The Traoré case, I'm thinking of, the one, of course, in North Paris. I'm thinking of the Ben Allah case, when the security guard who was in charge of the president's security team was caught on camera acting as almost like a vigilante police officer. I suppose if he hadn't been caught on camera, Natalie Pouzieff, Ben Allah would still be in his job, wouldn't he?
Yeah, well, I think anyway, it's no way we are going to prevent people to film, because in such occasion you have so many people with their smartphones. Everyone has the ability to film any scene happening in the street, especially when police forces are involved. So I
I'm sorry.
I don't see how you can really limit the possibilities of filming a scene, and for instance, coming back to the drones and the fact that it could be detrimental to the privacy of the people. The usage of drones has to be regulated and has to be limited. That's why we give special authorization to the national police force, not to the local police force, and in the pursuing of their missions of an investigation. It's not about doing anything, playing with drones around. And I can assure you that the people are asking for, police forces to be more in capacity today missions. For instance, the drones could be used to pursue, like we call les rodéos sauvages, motorbikes and
I hear what you're saying.
flying away,
Ram raiding,
and you
kind
can
of
use drone,
joyriding,
maybe.
those kind of things. Natalia Puzirev, I need to stop you. Thank you very much indeed. Final word, because we are at the end of the programme, and just to get it balanced, final word from you, Cecile.
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to add something else which proves how fast the procedure was. Too fast, definitely, because they didn't even take the time to make sure that facial recognition was not allowed. So I'm telling you how vague the legal frame is, because if not only policemen with body cameras, but also drones can capture but also record images, we don't know how they will be used later. This requires a very clear legal frame specifying that facial recognition is not envisaged. And even this is not at all certain. So I'm not at all paranoid. And it is in the name of Amnesty International, I can repeat that it is definitely a huge threat on human rights. It's a drift away from human rights that we are observing today in France, and we should take really, really seriously.
Cécile Couture, President of Amnesty International France, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Natalia Puzirev, MP for La République En Marche, member of the National Defence Commission, thank you for coming here and defending the new bill, the Global Security Bill, and that very controversial Article 24. We, of course, will continue to do our job as journalists to the very best of our ability here on France 24. Do stay with us.